But I went to the first two Pete Maravich camps.
Oh, you did?
One at Nichols, the other one here in New Orleans.
Wow.
And I cannot find the pictures of it. I know my mom's got it in the house somewhere, but where it's at is the question. But yeah, I got some nice stuff.
Yeah, because I like when you post that stuff on Facebook.
I got every Sports Illustrated. I got magazines from the mid '50s.
How do you keep them?
I have keep them where?
Well, they look like they're in mint condition.
Well, I have a friend of mine, he's from Wisconsin, and he came up with an invention thing of it's a hard plastic, and you slide it out, put the magazine in, put the slide back in, and I can hang it on the wall.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is the first place award winner of the 2015 New Orleans Press Club's Excellence in Journalism Award for the category of Best TV Sports Show.
Good evening, New Orleans, and welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we're going to talk a lot about the New Orleans Saints. We'll look at college football, LSU, and Tulane. We'll look back at the Saints' previous draft, also undrafted free agents. We'll get into what's going on in free agency, what they did in free agency. And to break it down for us is Mike Detillier of WWL Radio and so much more. And Mike, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being back. Always a pleasure having you on the show. Mike, before we get started, tell folks a little bit about what's going on. Obviously, you guys are getting ready to kick it off again with football WWL. You're on radio all year long, and of course, your fantastic draft magazine as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's nonstop for me because the only time that I can catch up, especially with the college players and doing the backgrounds of a lot of them, and I have a lot of it already done, is during that summer period in May and June, a little bit into July, it's sort of catching up a little bit, right. Not only film-wise, but also write-up-wise. You can't piece together that book in 20 minutes. So it's kind of catch-up time. Also, you know, nothing stays the same. I don't care if you're dealing with high school players, college players, professional players, nothing stays the same. So constantly keeping up on all that. And all the camps down in South Louisiana, it's unbelievable, Eric. So many of them here, from Jarvis Landry to offensive, defensive lineman camp, the Manning camp, you name it. Right. They got a ton of them this time of year.
Mike, everything has evolved, you know, from what we're doing now, from how we get our information, to what we were doing 10, 15 years ago in terms of getting our information. You have a magazine that is as detailed can get when you start talking about your draft report. How much has it changed in terms of you acquiring information, how you get your information to be able to put that publication together?
Hasn't really changed a lot. How you get film is a lot easier today than you could 10, 15 years ago. I mean, because now basically every game you want to watch a player, you can see him on TV, you can get that film. Or you can go to the SID and the people involved, they'll get it to you very, very quickly. So it's much easier today, film-wise. But how I do it today is pretty similar to what I did 10, 12, 15 years ago.
And how long does that take you?
All year long.
It's all year long. So
all year long.
How long would you spend on a particular player when you're doing this?
It just depends. I'm not breaking him down into powder because you know what happens. You're looking at a guy's weakness. You're trying to find something that's not there.
Yes.
Than looking at the positive part of him. Also, too, I'm doing it generically. When these 32 NFL teams put that board up, they're looking for, this is what I'm looking at this position, that position, this position. it's different than if you're doing it generically, like I do.
Yes.
So it's a little bit kind of give and take on that.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you want to call that generic, I mean, that is chock full of incredible information from the kids' high school days through college. I mean, you know, you pretty much, I'm surprised you don't know what they did during their bantam times playing Pee Wee ball.
Sometimes you get some of
Yeah.
that. And, you know, the crazy thing today is, you know, parents or people involved with them, coaches, they send you all this film. You know, I got a high school kid, his coach sent me film today. He caught 43 passes. I've seen all 43 catches. But my thing about it is I didn't see the whole game.
Right.
So, you know, there is a part of that that you don't see. And listen, I appreciate somebody sending me that to take a look at it, but it doesn't tell you the whole story of that player.
Yes.
And so that's why you have to go back, watch him, the plays he's involved and not involved.
You obviously know a tremendous amount about football. You've been doing it a long time, but how much is it your relationships really have helped you with your magazine? Because
Tremendous.
you got a tremendous amount of information in that publication.
Tremendous of me. Because now a lot of times coaches come to you about players. Hey, listen, I got a guy here that you got to take a look at. And so, you know, there is a lot of give and take in that. And listen, I've been here long enough doing it. My hair color is not quite any kind of color in it anymore. So you've been in the business for that long. They understand you and they trust what they're going to tell you. Now, a lot of times they'll tell you just the positives. So if you want to write that, that's great. But you better know the negatives too.
Yes.
And so that's the other part.
Now, what was your motivation to get it started?
Listen, I could have done this. My mom always says this. I could have done this when I was 9, 10, 11 years old. It was always something kind of part of the DNA to do. I have a lot of family members that are either coaches, former players, that sort of thing. So you kind of grew up in that environment.
And as far as putting it together today as it was when you first started, more difficult, less difficult, the same?
It's the same.
Pretty the
it's
same?
Still difficult.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you second guess every kind of look at some things. And you say, man, you know, I knew I should have had him in round one, and I didn't. This year, the biggest kind of gamble I took was when I went to print, I actually had the Saints picking Leonard Floyd from Georgia. And the last moment, it always came to me that there's always a pass rusher that comes up the draft boards that time of year.
Yes.
Sure enough, I said, forget it. I went with Rankins.
Right.
So, in essence, I switched Rankins and Floyd out. But I really, at first, said, you know what? This team really needs an edge pass rusher. Leonard Floyd would fit the bill.
Yes.
But then I thought about it. He's not going to be there. And so that's when I went with Rankins, who was my top-ranked defensive tackle.
And, of course, you were right. Let's talk about the draft before we kind of get a little bit more deeper into the Saints and your thoughts on this year's draft. And you could start with Sheldon Rankins.
You know, he's my top-ranked defensive tackle. He's the best pass rusher of the group. He's not, you know, everybody's critical of him that he's not 6'4" and 6'5". You know what? So what? I look at this league, I look at Aaron Donald. He's barely 6 foot tall if he's that with the Rams. He may be the top really interior guy they have from a pass rush standpoint. Geno Atkins with Cincinnati Bengals, maybe 6 foot and a half. Jarrell Casey, who I do a lot of work with the Titans Network, you know, he's maybe 6'1". So Rankins is bigger than all of them in that spot. All I know is for years, the Bucks, when they had Warren Sapp and Booger McFarland, those two guys aren't as big as what Rankins is. Natural skills, but when I look at a defensive lineman, the big cut between college and pro football, ability to use his hands. He's got to come off a block. He can't stay wired. He does a great job as a technician, using his hands to get himself free and then away. Because you can be 6'5" and 300 pounds and do all those other things. If you can't use your hands, you're useless. Useless as a player. Great pick for where they got him. I think he'll be an instant starter. And I do believe in a short period of time, you'll find out just how good he is. I think he's got a chance to be an all-pro player in this league.
What about Michael Thomas? A little bit surprised with a wide receiver as high as Michael Thomas, but obviously they really like what they saw out of him. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I had him ranked as a mid-second round pick. Now, again, I thought the Saints would pick a receiver, but not in round 2.
As did I.
But, you know, I look at Thomas, a big, thickly built receiver. He's the replacement for Marcus Colston. For all this talk about Brandon Coleman and all this other foolishness, you knew that they were going to draft a receiver somewhere to eventually take over for Colston. What I like about him, I think he'll really help you out immediately. Red zone, short yardage area of the field. That's where he'll excel. He needs some work as a route runner. But last week, in going to the OTAs, it was funny. Drew Brees talked about his relationship with Thomas, and that they did a play in practice. They hadn't even practiced.
Right.
And just a look, and he was right where he was supposed to be. Drew also brought up the fact that he works kind of overtime with him after practice is over with. I like that. That's encouraging, because I think when you look at Ohio State's playbook, man, it would be looking at the telephone book for the Bayou Parish area, and compared to New York City, when he's coming here with the Saints. How quickly he can adjust. I think he'll be a better player toward the end of the year than he will be at the beginning of the year, where, you find out in this league, man, those defensive backs can cover pretty good. That's not just every once in a while you're facing a top DB. That's every week. So, I was uncertain about that pick because, man, I say go back to defense.
Yes.
That's what you need.
Absolutely.
Go back to defense. But you know one thing, in Sean Payton's DNA, as a guy that's got some fingerprints, toe prints, any other body part print on this draft, he wanted a receiver, and Thomas was the one that he was looking at because of the size. He's always brought up the fact, I want a big receiver. The matchups downfield.
Yes. Now, talk about his hands. Talk about separation. You already said route run. I've heard that as well. He's going to need to work on his route running. But is he going to be able to get separation from NFL corners and catching the ball in traffic with his hands? How are those attributes?
Yeah. Well, he's got good hands. Now, sometimes the concentration varies a little bit. Everybody brings up the fact that, is he a number one receiver? Well, for this team, he doesn't have to be a number one. You better be a number one when I'm called upon. That's the way I look at it. When you called upon to be the number one guy, then you've got to be it. But for this team, if it's Brandon Cooks, if it's Kobe Fleener, if it's Thomas, Snead, you'll get your call. I think the biggest thing for him will be as a route runner and understanding when it's a 9-yard route, it better be 9 yards. When it's a 14-yard route, it better be 14. That's how tight this league is when you're looking at players. So I think that's the big adjustment, not the hands, anything else, the mental part and running a route correctly.
The Saints sign Roman Harper. We'll get into that in a moment. But your thoughts on Von Bell, what he brings to the table for this team?
Well, the selection of Von was ranked a little higher on my board than what Thomas was. Right. I like that pick. One, because of the fact he can match up coverage-wise. Man, a safety today, if he can't cover, you run out of downs.
Yes.
You can't play anymore. So you look at how he was covering in the slot, and that's a good spot. And what this tells you is this is the final year for Jarvis Byrd in New Orleans.
Yes.
I think they've come to that realization that because of injuries or whatever, it isn't working out. And you're going to have to cut your losses and move on. Von Bell, Kenny Vaccaro are your starting safeties of the future. But Von's smart. He's a guy that can cover very well. He's good in reverse. And he's a good open field tackler. That's what you're looking at. It's a guy who really excelled on the offensive side of football in high school, made that conversion well. And what I really like about it, Eric, is here's a guy that was recruited by everybody in the Southeast Conference. He doesn't kind of make any difference to him to be uncomfortable to leave his spot to go to Ohio State. That tells me, you know what, plays with a lot of confidence.
Yes. What can the Saints really expect realistically out of David Onyemata this year?
Man, I heard about David a couple years back.
Did you really?
Yeah, his coach called me, and he actually recruits the city of New Orleans and Louisiana for Manitoba.
Huh.
We're doing a radio show on a Monday night, and he's texting me. I just got off the phone with a local kid, and I'm trying to recruit him to go to Manitoba. What time do I have to be on with you guys? Right. So he's done this for the last couple of years here, and he kind of tipped me off, listen, and he told me this story. 5 years ago, walks in the office, Coach, I want to play. He didn't know what football was, had never seen a football before in his life. And so the coach threw him the football, and he says, it looks a little bit like a rugby ball. So fast forward 4 years later, he's the best offensive defensive lineman in the Canadian college ranks.
Right.
Eric, Football's not intuitive as a defensive lineman or offensive lineman. It's all about leverage and getting low and using your arms and hands and that sort of thing. You know, as a kid, you might be taught how to throw the ball, run the ball, catch it, try to get off of a block.
Right. Yes.
Get out of a stance. And the other thing in the Canadian Football League is you are lined up 1 yard off the line of scrimmage. You're not nosed up. So, man, you think about that guy who's 6'4" and 300 pounds and can run like what he can, never lifted weights before in his life. He did 33 reps of 225. That tells you one thing, he's pretty strong.
Yeah.
Now, he's a smart kid, but he's really going to get what I would call a semi-redshirt year. I think you put him in 10, 12 plays a game. Your job is get to quarterback. Go sack the quarterback because he's athletic. You go to the East-West Shrine game. The Monday and Tuesday, I wasn't able to go. You go to Wednesday, everybody was, you know, Aonamata, he was okay. Wednesday, he started to pick it up. He figured it out. Didn't make the same mistake twice. By Thursday's practice, he was the best defensive lineman they had. So that goes to show you there's a curve for him. 2017, when he's going to get it, he's going to get it.
Yes.
But boy, he's got a tremendous amount of athletic ability. But it's just, you know, he just doesn't have a lot of rep time as a player. And he's going to find out like Thomas. This is the NFL.
Right.
Man, you know, it's a big cut between playing the Canadian college football and coming into the NFL for a guy who never, 5 years ago, didn't even know what football was.
Right. What can the Saints expect out of Daniel Lasco? Had a great year in his junior year before he got injured. Where did you have him, and what do you think about him?
Yeah, I really thought he'd go a little bit earlier than where he went. He's more of a speed back than a power guy. Can help you out on special teams. He was a gunner for the Bears, did a really nice job there. One thing I do know, when you play in that system, you got to catch the ball. So this is an insurance policy for a football team that's been riddled with injuries at running back the last couple years. If it's been Ingram, Kyrie Robinson before he left, he got hurt quite a bit. Chris Ivory, when he was here, was hurt quite a bit. Last year, they had to go to Tim Hightower.
Right.
So this is the insurance policy. And last year, Marcus Murphy got picked, but, you know, then, you know, once he started dropping the ball on punts, then he got hurt.
Yes.
Then, you know, you went with the veteran. So hopefully Daniel can stay healthy, but he's a speed back, can cut the edge, catch the football real well coming out the backfield, can help you on special teams.
A couple undrafted free agents that fans should keep an eye on as they go into camp.
Landon Turner from North Carolina.
You think he's got a real shot to come in and
listen,
play with his team?
My thing about him is I don't want him to start year one.
Right.
If he can, that would be unbelievable. I just want him to come earn a spot because the big knock on Landon has been he has been a stock market player. And believe me, having watched him, he'll play some games really well, other games not so much. And so you ride the roller coaster with him. Also, the other thing, you know, and you and I know a little bit about this is saying, I'm full.
Yeah.
No, he's heavy. No, he's a 340-pound guy. Come on, you got to get your weight down.
Right.
That takes away from some of the specialness of your athletic ability. But he's a guy that's really, really talented. Trey Elston, also from Ole Miss, who has played kind of across the board. Strong safety, free safety, has been that rover spot guy for Ole Miss. Smart guy, can help out on special teams. One of the guys I'm interested in is Jared Dangerfield, who played at Western Kentucky in a system where they threw the football a ton.
Right.
And he's a tall drink of water. He knows how to get open, catches the ball well, a JUCO guy. So those are the guys that I'm looking at. The other guy, too, is DJ Petway from Alabama. The reason I say it is, and having watched him in a couple of the OTAs already, and it's just pajamas and slippers.
Yes.
But he's athletic and can get up the field. The other thing, too, is he got in trouble at Alabama. And Nick Saban basically tells him, you got to leave. He goes to JUCO, and Nick signs him back. My thing is, if you can't play,
Right.
you ain't coming back
There's
to
no way.
Alabama.
That's right.
So, you know, my antenna's up for DJ. Now, he played in part of a rotation a lot, certainly at Alabama. But I think those are some of the guys to look at to say, you know what, they got a shot here. The other guy is a second-year guy, R.J. Harris, who, I think has really got a chance to contribute this year. And in some of the practice sessions, you can see his work with Drew Brees, the way he catches the ball in traffic. And he's just a smooth operator downfield. And that second year for a wideout, in this system normally is when the clock comes up.
Yes. When you look at free agency, and we'll get into a little deeper into free agency in a moment, but your thoughts on the signing of Roman Harper? I talked a little bit about the fact that, his institutional knowledge and his leadership are two of the reasons why I think that they've signed him. When you look at his skill set, Kenny Vaccaro's kind of playing that position there. What do you think? Why do you think the Saints went out and brought him in?
He's an insurance policy in case Kenny gets hurt. You got all these young kids in the secondary.
Yes.
Now listen, you got to know what you're doing out on the field. Last year, we saw it with a bunch of young kids, mental mistakes, mental breakdowns, each and every game. Come on, in this league, you can't have that. You got to know what you're doing. So you don't have a veteran in the safety position behind Vaccaro. You bring in Roman Harper, who's had an affiliation with Dennis Allen when Dennis was here before under Greg Williams. He understands the game very well. Now, if I see him back there in the deep coverage part of the game, I'm going after him.
Yeah.
But you can see where he plays up front real well. Coming off the edge as a blitzer, which he excelled in with Williams here in New Orleans. So you could kind of see this. Something was going to happen because you had no veteran leadership behind the guys other than Vaccaro. Because, you can say, well, what about Jarvis Byrd? How can you lead if you're not on the field?
That's right.
If you're a young player, it's like, man, I understand your resume. How come you're not playing? How come you're not playing?
Great point. Great point.
So I think that was the big reason. Yeah, let me say this about locker room leadership, and I hear that all the time, and that's great and fine. But if you can't play, that locker room leadership is meaningless to me.
They're ignoring you, aren't they? For the most part. If you're not back on the field, if you're in the tub, you're on injury reserve, you kind of moved off to the side now. You're not really.
I'll tell you a story Champ Bailey told me when he came here. And Champ, you kind of knew that it was the end of the trail. And he was trying to help some of the younger players. And he made the comment to me that, man, I hear people saying about how, some of the younger guys are coming to me. He said, but that's not the truth. I'm going to them. That deal is, man, Champ Bailey, I saw you when, years ago, but, what about you now? So, you live in the present. And for a lot of these 21, 22-year-old kids, Roman Harper, I remember you getting beat, some of those deep patterns. The one thing I wish Roman could have brought with him from Carolina is the pass rush.
Yes.
And figure, that secondary was vulnerable last year, and he was part of that deep secondary. But he is the guy that if something would happen to Kenny Vaccaro, injury-wise, you could put into that spot. Because, again, their games are fairly similar.
Yes. Talk about overall free agency. Some publications out there have given the Saints failing marks for what they've done in the offseason. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts is you didn't address the edge pass rush skills. I mean, to me, that's still a major.
Was that a dollar and cents deal or just?
Well, my thing about dollars and cents wise, if you want a player bad enough, you find room to.
Well, they've done it. Look at
did it with Fleener.
Yeah, they did it with Byrd as well in the past.
And so my thing about all that is, you win up front, Eric. However you want to cut this, you win with offensive, defensive line. Other than the quarterback position, it's the crucial parts of this game. When you look at the Saints, isn't that the question mark you have today? Who's going to be your starting guards?
Right.
Who's going to be your edge pass rusher? Now, you might say Haloi Kakaha can fit that bill on one side as an edge pass rusher. I see him, and he excelled in that area in college. But if I see him with his hand in the dirt on first down, guess where I'm running? Right at him.
Right.
I want to see if he can play the run, because if he can't, then, then we got issues now. The other part about it is the coverage part of the game, where this team really took to the cleaners. Running backs, tight ends. Look at how they excelled catching the football against the Saints. How much better is that linebacking core up against the pass?
Right.
Now, I've talked to Stephon Anthony. He said, that was something he had to really kind of work on. And now he's being moved over to the Sam position. That's not James Laurinaitis' strength as a player.
Sure.
So, game one, if I'm Derek Carr, guess what I'm doing? I'm going to the back, going to the tight end. And then when you bring the safety up, then I'll throw the ball deep against you, because I want to test your safeties at that point. So I can understand some of the people saying, there's some major areas here you didn't address that were obvious needs. I think they're a 7-win football team. And listen, I got a friend of mine that grew up in the Thibodeau area, and now he has become one of the top odds makers in Las Vegas for 2 different casinos. And his deal is, he picked the Saints 6-10 last year. I picked them 8-8. He told me, I think you 1 spot too high. He said, I'm picking them 7-9. He was dead on right. So I think you pretty much, where you are, you're a little bit better defensively because of bringing in a Laurinaitis to handle the middle, not to have the middle mistakes. I think the key for this defense is 2-part. One, getting Kakaha and Stephon Anthony to play better than what they did a year ago, to have them more comfortable in that spot, for Kakaha to be the edge guy, and for Stephon to step up his game, certainly against the pass, but I thought he was pretty good against the run last year anyway. And secondly, Keenan Lewis, Damian Swann got to be healthy. Because if you got those guys healthy, along with Delvin Breaux and Kyle Wilson, you got 4 pretty solid cornerbacks there that you can play with. But, you know, you hope with Keenan, with his injury, he can come back. And with Damian, 3 concussions in 1 year, Eric, that's a lot. And in today's world, you really kind of throw it. So those 2 things defensively jump out at me of you've got to improve and get those guys better.
Staying with the defense for a moment, redshirt years for Tull and P.J. Williams. Well, what do you think their contribution can be this year?
Well, with Tull, he's just got to stay healthy. You know, I saw him play a lot in college. He's a natural pass rusher. He's not the biggest, fastest, strongest guy. He's just got a knack for getting around people, getting into the backfield, making plays, can help you on special teams. PJ, even before he got hurt, Swann looked like the better player in practice. Just looked it. You know, you could tell Swann played with a lot more confidence, had better ball skills. How well he can make that cut. It's not a question of injury today. It's a question of, you know, he took a big jump. And even though every day in practice you're going up against professional guys, with Florida State, he looked like the 6th round pick, and Damian looked like the 3rd round pick. So he's got to step up his game. With Tull, it's all about health. And he's had shoulder issues left and right now, so staying healthy. And I think he could certainly be a good situational player for you.
Andres Pete now has moved into the guard position. They'd like to see him as at least starting this year. You obviously looked at him in college. He gets a red shirt last year for the most part. Where do you think his natural position is? Where do you think he ends up playing this year?
His natural position is right tackle, eventually. But, you know, if I'm Peyton and everybody else on offense, I want my 5 best guys out there. So I would assume this year you would hope to have Pete play right guard, Street play right tackle. And so you take it from there. All I can tell you is, Eric, he was stiff as a board last year. He really struggled last year. Now, was it a weight issue, conditioning issue, everything else? You won't know about this until they play regular games. I mean, today, and a lot of people say, well, how they looked in the OTAs, offensive, defensive linemen, they're not hitting. I mean, come on, it's pajamas and slippers running around. So you can't tell that. And in preseason, we also know this part. Man, veteran players, they know what gear to kick it into. And so I think you'll find out real quickly with Pete, he has got to come through for them, because this football team is still very explosive on offense. Every year under Sean Payton, they have been a top 5 offense, but 1 year. I think they were 6th that year. So I expect that will all come back into play, and you will have a really good offense, but you got to keep number 9 standing. You can't have him thrown from a vertical position.
How do you think the rest of the division did in terms of draft and free agency?
I think Tampa probably made the biggest improvement of the group. Atlanta's got a bunch of guys that can they play? I mean, that's the big part for me. Can they play? And that draft was really peculiar, and how they handled some of the things, especially with their 1st round pick. You know, I mean, he's not a 1st round pick. Talent at safety. Debo Jones, I think, certainly will help them there. But you didn't add a compliment to Julio Jones at wide receiver. Man, if I'm playing him, I'll play him just like I did a year ago. And their offensive line is okay, but nothing special. The Bucs are a team with some talent here and there. It's all going to be about Jameis. Can he start up the motor? again and again and again. Doug Martin had a career year. Can he do it again?
Yes.
You've got receivers, you've got the tight end, got a better offensive line. I think you'll score points. Secondary is an issue with them. But you know what? Nobody's catching the Panthers.
That's going to be my next question. How did they do? How do you think they'll fare this year?
Offensively, I think they may be a better team than they were a year ago because they're getting Kelvin Benjamin back.
Great point.
And so you're talking about he looked like he could be a stud receiver. They're not as good on defense. They're not as good. Listen, when you lose a cornerback like Josh Norman, you're not better in the secondary than you were a year ago. So now a lot more zone cover. They're a zone cover team to begin with. Now you're going to see a lot more with that particular part. But that front seven is intact. And you throw in Vernon Butler. So you got what you got here. A team that has shown you consistency, smart coaching. They're going to be motivated to say, you know what, we didn't win it all. This time we're going to do it. They're the team to beat. And I hate to say this, but I think it's accurate that with an emerging young quarterback in Cam Newton now, and that you saw last year, his ability to throw the football so much better from the pocket. And you throw in Kelvin Benjamin and Greg Olsen and that running game and that front seven. Eric, it's going to be hard to knock that team off for the next 2 to 3 years.
How serious do you think the flirtation was with Josh Norman?
I think it was major. I don't think there's any question. They wanted Josh Norman on this football team. They just couldn't get him out of the Washington facilities. But I think it was major. No question about it. They wanted him. But it would have been a strange situation now because now you'd have had Bro, Keenan Lewis, Josh.
And then these rookies trying to get by for playing time as well. No doubt. Let's take a quick break. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports every Thursday night right here on WLAE at 6 p.m. Also on Fridays, 10 p.m. on WLAE. And on Pelican Sports Television in the New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Lafayette markets. That's Friday night, 9 p.m. Mike Detillier of WWL Radio is our guest. I'm your host, Eric Asher. We'll be right back after these messages from our underwriters.
New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by.
Located on Lake Pontchartrain, Brisbee's Lakefront Restaurant and Bar offers traditional West End favorites, a scenic view, oysters, and numerous tasty options. More information is available at 504-304-4125 or brisbeesrestaurant.com. Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House has been shucking here since 1979. Located at 3117 21st Street in Metairie, Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House offers raw, fried, and grilled oysters as well as a range of Cajun and Creole dishes. Enjoy a dozen with a smile. You're watching WLAE, New Orleans Public Television. Find us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Mike Detillier of WWL Radio and Mike Detillier's Draft Day Report is with us today. Mike, I wanted to ask you a little bit about Garrett Grayson first, and I want to kind of get away from the team for a moment before we go into college football. Everywhere I go, people want to know about Garrett Grayson. Garrett Grayson. Is he going to overtake, and he's going to be the second, the backup? He's going to one day be the heir apparent to Drew Brees? What are your thoughts?
You better step it up. You base it off of last year, just in playing performance. Ryan Griffin played better than he did in the preseason, but he was a third-round pick. You kept him. He's Sean's guy. He's the guy he wanted. All I can tell you is I would play Drew Brees until the wheels come off the cart. If you think Garrett Grayson is ready to start in the NFL today, then I got mountain front property on Bayou Lafourche to sell you.
You're right.
I mean, that's just not the case. So in today's world, it's all about the present. What can you do for me today? Is he a better player than he was a year ago? Yes. But is he the starter eventually? he hasn't proved anything, and you've got to do it on the field. I mean, all this prognostication stuff, that's great and fine, but you got to do it on the field. If what you've seen, do you really think today that you would be comfortable with Garrett Grayson as your starter? And so you would go with Luke McCown.
Right.
You would go with
Absolutely,
Luke.
you have
You'd
to.
go with Luke.
What about his skill set, though? Can he make all the throws? His athleticism. I mean, you've watched this kid. You looked at him coming out of the draft. Now you got him with the Saints for a second year. What about that part of his game?
He's accurate. He's smart. But it's the split-second decisions. You know, I work with 3 former quarterbacks every week. Their deal is you like a jet fighter pilot.
Right.
It's that quick.
Right.
You got to make the decision. You got to get rid of the football. You see Drew Brees do things, and we take it for granted to say, oh, wow, he made that throw, and he made, oh, man, it's just unbelievable. A couple practices ago, we watching him. He threw 16 footballs. The ball never touched the turf. I mean, Eric, still, you guarding that receiver, and the ball never touched the turf. He looked like he was playing in October. You know, it wasn't July.
Yes.
I mean, it's amazing to watch how accurate he is. We haven't seen that from Grayson in any of the practices. He is a little bit of a stock market guy. He'll make one good throw, one throw erratic. The other thing, too, is he loves to check down, throw it short underneath.
A lot of young players do.
You know why? It's safe. And eventually, Peyton Manning told me this years ago, eventually you got to open up the envelope. You just can't look at it. Eventually, you got to open it up and press it. And that's the thing with Garrett. We don't know right now. Can he be that type player that eventually will open up that envelope and press it?
Right. You and I are the same age, and of course, when we look back on 50 years of Saints football, we've seen a lot of heartache. We've seen some good times.
A lot of bad football.
Yeah, a lot of bad football. But take us back to your first memories of the Saints, and maybe some memories that stick out to you over the last 50 years.
You know, I was old enough as a kid. I was young. My brother and I, my dad got 2 season tickets for the first year. Well, you know, being a younger kid, you know what? You didn't get to go to game 1. You just listened to it. You know what sticks out in my mind, and certainly the Gilliam run, you know, it's an unbelievable thing because first play, you score. And this is a team, at that time you played 6 preseason games.
Yes.
They were 5-1. You know, so you as a kid, man, you think, man, the Saints got the world by the teriyaki here. And then you found out real quick. From the Gilliam run all the way up until Jim Mora got here, it was a slide.
Yes.
You know, one thing I do remember in listening to it, and they used to do the introductions a little bit differently, was hearing them introduce Jimmy Taylor for the first game against the Rams. He got a 1-minute standing ovation in that old Tulane Stadium. And, you know, you're just like, man, you know, this is really something. And by that time, Jimmy, you know, he had lost it as a player. Some unbelievable years, certainly with the Packers. And the other thing, too, is I do remember, and NFL Films lost this, is watching the Saints are close against the Giants. They might pull this game out to be the first win ever for the Saints regular season in old Yankee Stadium. And now fight breaks out with Steve Stonebreaker after the game. And I mean, you talk about a melee afterwards. NFL Films conveniently has lost that footage of that particular deal. But year 1, just the excitement of NFL football in New Orleans. And, you know, we grew up, and people sometimes think this is ancient history. It was the 2nd grade for me before I went to school with anyone of color.
Right.
I can remember bathrooms, restaurants that blacks could not attend, couldn't go in. The civil rights movement was huge in that part of, you know, part of our society.
No doubt.
We were just coming off of 2 major events, too, that had kind of shook not only Louisiana, but shook America. One was the assassination of President Kennedy.
Yes.
Secondly was Hurricane Betsy. So you add all that up. It was turbulent times, but the Saints brought to the table something everybody could cheer for.
Yes.
And a lot of it is, I can't say it's the exact same, but it's had a lot of similarities to 2006. That, you know, this was the one thing that you could galvanize a community with.
Yes.
And despite the fact you weren't winning, you had a team. And to think Gilliam runs the kickoff back all the way, and most of that stadium's white cheering for him.
Exactly. Well, you know, I remember Buddy D saying this, that he thought the Saints were one of the single most important things that ever happened in the city of New Orleans in terms of race relations.
Yeah, and you know, Buddy gave me a lot of different things throughout the years we worked, and told me stories and gave me a ton of papers that in write-ups that he had back then. He said if you looked at, and there was certainly some violence in the Louisiana and New Orleans area, but nothing like it was in Alabama and Georgia and Mississippi and in Arkansas. And so he said, I really think the Saints had a play in that, that it sort of got everybody together on one issue. Another thing, too, is how the state's divided. And it still is today. There's New Orleans here, the Bayou, Acadiana, mid Louisiana, and then in the northern part of the state. You know, we like a kind of a banana republic, so to speak. We kind of cut up 6 different ways, the way we look at things. But you know what? It was like that for Saints football. People in North Louisiana, they weren't watching the Saints, they were watching the Cowboys.
That's right.
And the same thing, so to speak, in some parts of Southwest Louisiana. So the Saints were able to do that. But Buddy was, I think, spot on that it did play a part in having people understand. And a lot of people, they'll disagree with you until they don't know what they're talking about. The Saints integrated before LSU did.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Just think about that.
Yeah.
Just think about that. Before LSU and Alabama and Georgia and Ole Miss and all those schools, the Saints and the Falcons did.
Right. Some things that stuck out to me, obviously, you talk about the first game. You talk about the drafting of Archie Manning. Winning, I remember his first year beating the Los Angeles Rams and
on the final play.
Right, and the Dallas Cowboys. That was one of the wins.
And they won the Super Bowl that year.
They sure did. The Tom Dempsey 63-yard field goal, which I think a lot of us look back on. You know, the Moores, when Moore got there, the first winning season. Then you look later on, on the Haslett, the first playoff win. And then, of course, the 2009 Super Bowl. There's been a lot of high points, a lot of low points, but a lot of high points also.
Those
that I think
Atlanta games in the late 70s.
You're not kidding, huh? Big Ben?
Big Ben 2.
Yep.
We saw every possible way for you to lose a game. And those were some really good offensive teams for the Saints. I mean, with Archie, with Galbraith and Muncie.
Right.
You had Ike Harris, God bless him, Henry Childs, who just passed away, Rich Morty on those teams, Wes Chandler. And, you know, Conrad Dobler coming in. He came in here with an attitude. And I'll never forget this story. And Conrad told it to me, but Archie somewhat gave me the 2 thumbs up. It was correct. Archie gets his jaw broke late in the season. Final game against Atlanta. Jeff Morrow breaks his jaw. So, you know, you're going through, you know, Christmas time, New Year's, broken jaw, that sort of thing. Final game. I mean, come on, you know, it was unnecessary. So the word gets back to Conrad that Morrow was the one who did it on kind of a dirty play. Conrad's deal was, I'll take care of it. Well, by 3 plays into the game, they bring in the people out to pick Morrow up. It was payback. It was, it was kind of payback on Dobler's part, where he went for a lower shot and went for the knees and took care of business.
It was a different game back then.
Totally. And that's the thing that gets me about the NFL today. They almost play as though that never happened.
Yes.
You know, but yet they marketed big plays, big hits, all that stuff. They marketed that. You know, I look back at as much as the friction was between Al Davis and the league, they loved the Raiders. Because why? Money, prime time, got your viewing audience.
Yes.
Because, you know, they had people on the East Coast, they had people in the South, they pulled for the Raiders, silver and black. You know, and so it was a totally different game, but you write about the memories with that. It was the hope every year that maybe, just maybe it would come together. And I think the biggest disappointment was Hank Stram coming in. Because, you know, Hank came in with all that flair. He had been to 2 Super Bowls, everything else, and just couldn't get it done.
Is it because he didn't get enough time in your estimation, or Was it the game? Because I don't know if the game passed him by.
I think the game, from a coaching standpoint, the way he did it, passed
him by?
Passed him. Now, he had collected a lot of good players that Dick Nolan won with.
Right.
And, you know, but still, I don't know if Hank could have done that. You know, he had some great players with the Chiefs, though. But you know what? Everybody has their moments as a coach. It comes to an end somewhere along the line.
Yes.
And I think it kind of came for Hank. And, you know, listen, he wanted to try it again. My thing about it, if the game hadn't passed him by, I think somebody else would have known that and hired him afterwards. And it didn't happen.
We saw the transition from Old Tulane Stadium to the Louisiana Superdome. The dome now, when you start looking at the renovations, how that dome is, the city just lost out on the 2019 Super Bowl. Mike, do you anticipate this building getting another Super Bowl before they either have to totally retrofit it, tear it down? What do you think happens with the future of the dome?
You know, with as much money has been put into it,
over $400 million.
That's a lot of cash being put into it. Eventually, you run out of new stadiums. It is the caveat that the commissioner kind of throws out there. You know what? You build a new stadium, man, I'll push for you to get a Super Bowl. You know, make it, you know, kind of you do one thing, I'll do the next. That's what this commissioner is all about. It's a little bit of trade-off. Also, too, I think everybody that has ever covered a Super Bowl tells you the same thing. I want to go back to New Orleans. It's easy to get around. It's walking distance for most things here. So I believe that they will get another Super Bowl, the Superdome, kind of the way it is. Now, more money may have to be put into it. But how could you go to voters and say, we need to redo this, and you've got to pay the tab?
Yes.
Not in today's climate, you can't, Eric. Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Not going to happen.
Not going to happen. And my thing about it is, if it doesn't come back, so be it.
Right.
So be it. You've got an NFL team. If it goes to a new stadium, yes, you'd love to get it. But if it doesn't happen, it doesn't. But I do believe that's going to be and you know, events change too. And how this situation fares out down the road, ownership-wise, and everything else, I think it's going to play a big part in the future for the Superdome to eventually get another Super Bowl.
Yeah, I do too, because I think the next time around, when they start talking about building new stadiums, it's not going to be the state of Louisiana footing the bill. It will be a cooperative effort between whoever owns the Saints and the state of Louisiana, in my opinion. I think that's the only way to get it done now.
Well, my thing about it is you can't ask the state of Louisiana to chip in anything today.
At least not right now, that's for sure.
Not in this current state.
Right.
And, you know, again, we're going back to politics, but it's always involved in Louisiana of who's the governor at that time.
Right.
Who's got the power to say, maybe
Great
I can
point.
give you a little bit of money here and there if I shuffle this and that, but then you've got to give something back. Ownership is going to play a big part in it. And listen, what they've done to be in the ballpark with all the turbulence that's going on goes to show what the city, and they pieced together a really, really nice deal. But you know what? The new stadiums are going to win out.
Yep, no doubt. Let's shift gears to college football. Talk about LSU. A lot of people anticipating a Final Four season for this team. It comes down, again, to a lot of things. But let's talk about the quarterback position first. Brandon Harris in his junior year or Danny Etling? What do you think happens there?
Man, listen, Danny Etling was a third-string quarterback at Purdue. You think all of a sudden that's going to work? No. This team is Brandon Harris's to win or lose with. And Brandon has shown the spurts that he can be a pretty good passer. I think what they do offensively makes no sense to his skill set as a player. He is a guy that throws the football so much more comfortably on the move, the waggles, left and right. What they got him doing, sitting in the pocket. Eric, it's almost like, okay, why are you recruiting spread option quarterbacks when you want to run a pro-style set? That doesn't make any sense. Okay, if you're a great coach, you adapt to the talent that you have.
True.
I think this year, only because of how it ended, and I will say this, I think it's maybe the greatest 8-month postseason run in LSU history. Following that night of Texas A&M, and you just look at what has happened to this football team. Les got the reprieve. You're coming back. He loses Kevin Steele, but brings in, I think, a much better defensive coordinator than Dave Aranda. He's went out and get Damian Craig, who I think is a really, really good coach. Ed Ogeron takes now on as the recruiting coordinator. You see a little bit different way of recruiting. He's always been solve the quarterback issues and then linemen. That's what I want. And that's what he's doing today. You look at their recruiting class, one of the top 2 or 3 in the country. You know, you've got everybody coming back but one junior, Gerald Hawkins, who, I mean, Eric, you couldn't ask for a script better to have it say, this is what's going to happen, and you've got a shot to make it to the big game. The big question mark for me, for LSU, is not only at quarterback, which has certainly been the sinkhole for this football team. System-wise, do they adjust it to what Brandon can do best? And I think Les, feeling as though he got a reprieve, he's going to run the football more this year than he did a year ago. I'm going to show you that my system works, and I'm going to do it my way. And I think they run the ball more this year than they did in 2015. The other thing, too, is in November, and I don't care at any level, if it's high school, college, professional, first things first, you got to stop the run defensively. This team last year gave up 1,400 yards rushing all year long. In 3 games in November against Alabama, Ole Miss, Arkansas, over 700 of it. Half of that came in 3 games. And Ole Miss, they ain't no great running team by any stretch of the imagination. You have got to be able to stop the run. I think it has been the biggest key for Nick Saban at Alabama. Everybody says development of players, and he's done a great job. But you know what it's been? He slammed the door on you and say, you know what, if you're going to beat me throwing it. I don't think the quarterbacks that are out there can beat my team throwing it consistently. The other thing, too, is their ability to run the ball. LSU can do that in the same rank as what Alabama can, but they haven't been able to stop the run. I think that's been the biggest key for Saban, is year in, year out, his teams have slammed the door. He almost got caught, though, in a national championship game, because you know what? That Deshaun Watson's pretty good.
Yes.
And you know the guy who beat him, Chad Kelly? That might be the first 2 picks of next year's draft.
There you go.
Goes to show you how he does it. LSU's got to get better stopping the run.
That'll take me to the new 3-4 defensive scheme. First of all, you're pretty close with Bebe Orgeron. Does it fit the players they have on this team right now? How do you think that helps them going forward?
I think that you're going to have some hiccups along the way, early on, because of mental mistakes, not the talent. I think the mental mistakes. One, I have not heard as much chatter about a defensive player up front since Glenn Dorsey as I have about Arden Key.
Yes.
He's not good. He could be great as a player. Davin Godchaux on that middle. All I'm telling you is the worst things you watch in college football today is to watch the center and guard play. I mean, they're going to have some difficulties blocking Davin when he sit up on that center. I think in time it'll really come through. You know that secondary will be okay. But it will take a little while for all that to come together. The big question mark for me is the depth. They're razor thin along the defensive line and also at linebacker. If you have a major injury to somebody, then you've got to call upon the 18, 19-year-old kids, the Rashard Lawrences of the world. What happens with Valentine? Does he finally get here, and does he make an impact? I know one thing. First time he gets on that scale and Bebe sees 300 and the second number is going to be 3 or more, he ain't going to be a happy camper. But that's going to be the key. Can they develop those young kids? Because you're going to have a couple of them step up. The same thing at linebacker. Can Mike Divinity be that player coming off the edge? And I'm telling you, I think the guy that'll be the next, I don't want to say Miles Jack because Miles played a lot of running back, but it's Devin White at linebacker.
Yes.
He's special as a football player. So I think, you know what? It's all chips in. Because if you lose 3 games in November, this time the guillotine strikes.
There's no reprieve.
There's no way out of it.
Right.
But I do believe this team will get to the SEC championship game. I think they will get to the SEC. Now, if you think you got pressure, you ought to be was seeing what's going on at Tennessee right now with Butch. Because if Butch Jones doesn't get that volunteer football team in the SEC and win the East, then he might be toast too. So it's going to be a lot of pressure across the board. They still all trying to catch Alabama and Nick Saban. But wouldn't this be the year an inexperienced quarterback, a center? Ryan Kelly was unbelievably how he set everything up front for that Bama team. Uncertainty on Greg Robinson at that critical left tackle position, and you've lost some pieces up front defensively. This is the year. If you're going to catch them, you got to catch them.
Isn't that why a lot of these juniors came back? They felt they had a real chance?
Yeah, no doubt that unfinished business, that we should have had this in 2015 and we let it slip away. And you got the greatest player in college football on your team, and you know what? You let him down.
There's no doubt about that.
Ashawn Robinson trained in Baton Rouge, and he made it known, and he publicly said it on radio and TV when he was interviewed. LSU ran the same thing when I was a freshman as I did when I was a junior. We knew exactly what was going to happen. Some of Leonard Fournette's best runs was he had to out-juke us when there were 3 people trying to tackle him. And so that does tell you, you've got to change. Come on. That any great businessman, coach, anybody in any profession, you've got to change in time. Not maybe your core values, but you've got to be able to adjust to what's going on around you.
No doubt about it. Self-scouting is huge, especially in the offseason. Tulane, new coach, Willie Fritz, new offensive scheme. What's the talent level of Tulane this year?
I would say it's below average. And now you look at it, can Tulane recruit back in Louisiana?
Right. It's going to take a while for him to kind of get a foothold again, right?
You better believe it, because now, man, it's like deer running in the field. You've got and listen, I get it, from coaches, from TCU, Texas A&M, you name it, across the country. Their deal is there's not a number 2 school in the state of Louisiana. LSU can't sign everybody, so they're in here. If it's Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Southern Miss, you see them. Everybody's here now to try to grab the 2s. Willie's got a tough road. But one of the things on Tulane's football team that I think has got to be improved upon is all the mental mistakes you made last year. If it was special teams, turnovers, that's where it cost, it cost CJ his job.
Yes.
Because you can't make those mental mistakes. You can't have those blunders on special teams each and every week. Critical fumble, critical interception. But you know what? No matter what, I don't care what you got to have steady play at quarterback.
Mike, the offensive scheme lends it to the type of talent that we have here in Louisiana, though, doesn't it?
A lot of it. A lot.
I mean, he should. If he can recruit as well as he did in other places he's been, I mean, this is fertile ground for the type of offensive scheme he's running.
It is. The thing about it is, to me, is going to be selling your program to Louisiana kids again. I mean, we're not back in the 70s anymore, where, you know what, very few kids kind of left the state. Every once in a while.
They're in high demand now.
They'll go anywhere. I remember being on the Bayou, Carl Morgan, who went to Vanderbilt Catholic. He went to UCLA. Man, that was a big thing.
Yeah.
He goes to UCLA. People made a lot of things about John Forcade leaving Shaw to go to Ole Miss.
Right.
I mean, that's right across the border.
Yeah.
Now you've got everybody here recruiting. And to tell you that, here's Manitoba in Canada recruiting the state of Louisiana. Goes to show you, it's a tough road for Willie to win. But I think the talent level here would lend it to be that way. Where he can make the biggest improvement in staying games is to not commit those critical errors at the most crucial times in a game, and to get solid quarterback play. You don't have to have a great quarterback, solid quarterback play.
Right, especially the type of system he's running. If you've got an athletic quarterback, complete a couple passes, let the running backs do the work.
My thing about it is, look the kid at Houston. He's all of 5'10.5", maybe 185 pounds, soaking wet. I got this deal on him coming out. When he was coming out, every school, rejection at quarterback, rejection. He's a wide receiver defensive back. All of a sudden, Herman comes in, and he puts in that offense. Look how good Houston was. They cleaned Florida State's clock in that bowl game at the end of last year. They cleaned their clock with him. Houston Cougars are a really good football team. that guy's not just a good quarterback.
Right.
He's a little bit better than good. But I tell you what, a year ago, if I'd have said that, most people, man, you crazy. There's no way that guy's that good. It goes to show you how quickly scheme and talent fit. He made it work. That's what Willie's got to do here.
Mike Detillier, thanks so much for being
Thanks
with us
so much,
here
Eric.
on
Appreciate
Inside
it.
New Orleans Sports. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there's a rebroadcast of this program each and every Friday night right here on WLAE at 10 p.m. Also on Pelican Sports Television at 9 p.m. Also, you can catch me on the radio, 990 a.m. WGSO, weekdays 11 a.m. until 1 p.m. Also on ericasher.com, where you can listen live, download the podcast, and you can see every episode of the award-winning Inside New Orleans Sports. Don't forget about that TuneIn Radio app. It's a free download for your smartphone or tablet. Special thanks again to Mike Detillier, also to the WLE production staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, also Naila Jones, Philip Williamson, Christian Medor, and also my director, William Hill. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you right back here for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports next Thursday night.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is the first place award winner of the 2015 New Orleans Press Club's Excellence in Journalism Award for the category of Best TV Sports Show.